Everyone ready to go? Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and welcome to the Attleboro School Committee meeting of Monday, February 8th, 2021. This is your notice that this meeting is being electronically recorded. At this time, we'll start the meeting with open forum. Is there anyone who would like to address the committee at open forum tonight? Thank you. Hello, Mr. Amaro. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman Withers. Thank you for the recognition. Honorable members of the school committee, just want to take a moment to thank all of you for your participation in the AEA school committee forums. The time and conversations that you had with the members was greatly appreciated, and I hope that at some point they can continue. Again, thank you very much, and thank you for the recognition.
Mr. Amaral, and I'll echo you and just thanking you and your membership for putting those meetings together. I think they were fruitful, at least to hear each other out and to get on the same page. And I think it's a good idea we continue the dialogue going forward. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the committee at open forum? All right, I'm getting it. A no from AACS, so that will close open forum, and we will move on to our business agenda tonight. And to start off, I will turn it over to the superintendent for his report.
Thank you, Chairman Withers. I wanted to start tonight. I think that the committee and the community that you represent are owed an explanation for why we were remote today. I think a lot of people noticed that the roads were in pretty good shape this morning, and so there was some questions about why we had to operate remotely. The first thing I would point out is that the decision to cancel school as a result of a snow event in particular is more than just a decision about driving conditions. While that's often the first concern, it is more complicated than that. We also have to be concerned about sidewalks. As you know, especially when we have very high accumulations, it is not uncommon that we lose an extra day, sometimes even more, because city sidewalks have to be cleared. We have a significant number of walker students in some particular neighborhoods that, having the students walking out in the street is certainly a danger. But there are other issues as well. We've had problems with power outages that sometimes get in the way when we have a snowstorm. And then the final part is that our preparedness for a safe opening to school each morning also includes making sure that our grounds are prepared. And that's really what happened with this storm this weekend. We were not able to get the grounds ready for the start of school. There's a lot that goes into how this could happen. The first is that I would remind everybody that as an underfunded district, our resources for snow removal are extremely limited, right? That's why in a year where we have high accumulations, we run a deficit in our snow line because we every year play a little bit of dice with this one and try, hope for the best that we're not going to have big snow problems. But we also have limited resources to deal with our snow problems in the district. We have a significantly understaffed facilities department, both in terms of our custodians and maintenance, and the equipment that they use, is at best meager compared to what we sometimes have to deal with as a New England community. Now, under most conditions, this is something that is enough to get us through. Certainly, one of the numbers that Mr. Furtado and I talk about is the 4-inch mark. So Usually anything 4 inches or less is something that we can manage pretty successfully as a district. As we start to get higher than that, 6 inches or yesterday, maybe even 8, that's when we start to run into trouble. And in this particular case, because it was a weekend, because it happened earlier, I think a lot of families thought that we should be able to get this done. And under normal circumstances, we would have. But as we've talked about on multiple other occasions, one of the difficulties of operating during this pandemic is that it leaves us with staffing problems. We went into Sunday thinking we were going to have a full staff to address the storm. And by halfway through the storm, we realized that we were understaffed. So that was unexpected. And without the normal manpower that we're able to throw at a problem like this, we were just not able to get the job done in time. And, as I've talked about, when we talk about preparing the grounds, the sidewalks around the schools, the walkways, the stairs, these are all things that have to be prepared so that people can enter the building safely. And for that reason, we thought that operating remotely was the safest thing to do. Now, I will admit that when we had to make a decision last night, when we knew that there was going to be a problem with us being prepared, going remote today was not the only option that we had. One thing that we could have done differently is we could have held off in the hopes that maybe we would do better than our best estimates would be, and wait till morning to make a decision based on how things looked at that time. There wasn't much reason to believe that that would have changed much. And so it's in my time making these decisions, I've come to the opinion that while everyone wants us to have school when we're supposed to have school, and it is always our goal to open school when we've scheduled to have school, when that's not going to be possible, I think families like to find out the bad news about that the night before, whenever possible. And so we didn't believe that taking the risk by going in the morning was likely to change the outcome. And, for that reason, we thought that parents would appreciate the time to prepare for that news. The other part of the decision was we could have considered a 2-hour delay. But again, in my experience, I find that 2-hour delays are particularly unpopular. They still are extremely disruptive to families, and they result in a significantly diminished school day. So from our perspective, given that we could this year use remote as an option, we thought that remote was the best opportunity. But I've been talking to people who've reached out about the decision, and certainly we welcome feedback from people if our assessment of how people feel about those kinds of decisions. If people have other thoughts about that, that certainly would inform future decisions. At this point, I'm going to switch over to COVID, but I don't know if the committee had any questions about snow.
Any questions on snow in general or today's decision? Just one question I have. Snow decisions are always, troubling. You're never going to make everyone happy. So I'm overly sympathetic about the decisions. I guess my question I have is just for my own curiosity's sake is how much, if at all, this year's unique circumstances with just having the remote option played into the decision. If that wasn't the situation and it would have been a cancellation or not, as opposed to having essentially a regular school day just remote, did that impact the decision or no?
Yeah, I would have to say that we would have given a 2-hour delay a lot more consideration if going remote today was not an option. Which, is a different set of circumstances, which is why if in the minds of a lot of people, that was the wrong way to think about it. That's information that would be helpful for the next time we have to make a decision.
Yeah, and I'm not implying that at all. I just thought, in my mind and thinking about it.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. And I would just add that, there's a forecast for snow tomorrow. Last weather report I got, I should mention that we get a pretty detailed report from the National Weather Service, which is very, very helpful. And they send out multiple reports as needed as conditions change. My understanding is that tomorrow's snow event isn't supposed to start until after 8 o'clock in the morning, and that we're looking at around 2 to 3 inches through the course of the day. And again, those kinds of accumulations over the amount of time that it's expected to happen, we believe will be something that we can handle without much trouble. But certainly, we'll get up the check out to see if the forecast has changed, and anyone concerned should be on the lookout for a message in the morning. Okay, so to move on to updates about the district and operating in our hybrid mode under our current conditions. The overall message is that things have continued to improve slightly. Our virus data shows a gentle downward slope at this point. We're not dropping precipitously, but the overall trend for the last few weeks continues to move downward. But I would like to point out that we still are at numbers that are well above guidance from both the state and the CDC on how, what would need to be safe to consider a full return in person. So got a long way to go, but at least we're headed in the right direction rather than climbing like we were back in December. Staffing continues to be a daily challenge, but one that we're managing. And luckily, I haven't had a need to close anything as of yet. So we're hopeful that that's going to continue. And of course, that goes hand in hand with the fact that numbers are dropping. So when numbers were climbing, we were having increasing problems. Now the numbers are dropping. It's, I wouldn't say that we've cleared this as a daily concern, but it's a little bit less acute than it was back in December. And then as for temps in the buildings, after a solid month of well above average temperatures, we enjoyed one of the warmer Januaries we've had in some time. Winter has arrived. The polar vortex that we talked about a couple of weeks ago is certainly affecting the weather patterns. They were predicting a warmer February, and that's not the case at this point. Luckily, though, we haven't experienced a extreme cold snap, which would be the conditions that we're most worried about. Under the current cold conditions, our buildings are definitely impacted. The temperature are cooler than what we would normally expect. There are areas of the building that are on the cooler side, but it's all within levels that we think is reasonable. And certainly, if on any given day a particular area has a problem, we try to address that, or if we have to move people, we will. But for the most part, we've been very lucky in that regard. And I do think that the snow that we've been experiencing has helped to moderate temperatures. So we've been lucky in that regard. As much as the snow's been a pain, it has helped to keep us in the 20s, which is a temperature it seems like we are able to manage. So nothing in the forecast this week from a temperature perspective concerns us. And we're certainly glad that next week is a vacation week. And I would remind everybody that if you look at the forecast for next week, that's one of the reasons why we do a break in February. So on the whole, our data and the conditions in the district are trending in a better direction, in a good direction, one that gives us cause for hope for things to be changing. That said, things are still serious. I think it's important that we don't lose sight of the fact that our levels are still quite high, and it has an impact. We had a few staff members in the last week or so lose loved ones to COVID. We've been lucky that we haven't had actual members of our faculty deal with that, but we certainly know that they've had people in their extended family that they've lost. And it's just a grim reminder that this is still a problem. It's still raging in the community and locally and across the region. And it's not something that we can take lightly or think that somehow we've cleared the hurdle. We have a way to go. As we look forward, I think there are two variables we should keep a very close eye on, because they would affect our outcomes in different directions. And it's hard to know which one's going to win out in terms of pushing the needle as for what kind of things we're experiencing. So the first is the vaccine itself, which I'm going to talk a little bit about in a bit. But there's a chance that as temperatures improve, as we turn the corner on the winter weather, as more people are able to go outside, that the viral numbers are trending down already, that those things will contribute to a downward trend. And then there's a tipping point at which enough people get vaccinated, and it's possible that viral levels in the district will actually bottom out very quickly at a certain point. And so I've been telling people that while I don't really think that that's a likely outcome, we need to be prepared for that if all of a sudden, it takes a pretty significant turn quickly as a result of enough people being vaccinated as part of a downward trend. But moving in the other direction, I'm sure everyone's familiar with the fact that there are new variants that from other parts of the world that are now spreading here in the U.S. There's reason to believe that these variants are going to take over as being the dominant form of COVID within the next few months. And it's a real race between whether the variants will spread fast enough to take over or whether the vaccines will be distributed fast enough to hold them off. And so there's a real possibility that all of our thinking about what's safe and what we've been doing that's been working will be upended by the fact that these new variants are more transmissible and more deadly. And so when you put those two things together, we can't assume that what we know to be true in this moment will continue to be true, given that these new variants have the potential of changing what is true. So that's another thing that we have to keep a close eye on. At this point, it's not having an impact on our numbers. As I said, numbers are heading in the right direction, but we need to be paying close attention, because if we start to see a turn in the numbers backward or upward, that might be a suggestion that something's happening and we don't want to contribute to a greater outbreak, which has been the concern all along. So in terms of specific things that are going on in the district, obviously we were very excited last week that we finally got to do pool surveillance testing for the first time. It took us several weeks to get that off the ground. I want to express my appreciation to all of our staff that helped to make that happen and the families that participated. On Thursday, we tested 931 people in the district. A pretty good number of those were faculty members. And then the rest obviously were students. And we're going to test again tomorrow. Now, as you know, the testing last Thursday resulted in 0 positive pools. Some people were very, very surprised by that result, but I've been trying to explain to people that if you go by just the simple statistics of it all, it really makes a lot of sense, right? In a community where the average daily cases has been around 50 for months at this point, 50 out of 100,000 is 5 out of 10,000, is a half out of 1,000. And so if we test 1,000 people, you would say there'd be a half of a positive person. So for every two times you do that, one of them should come up positive. So statistically speaking, tomorrow's testing should yield a positive pool. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but that's roughly the kind of results that we should expect. The experts that we've been working with for months now on this told us that that's what we should expect. That's what other communities are experiencing. And it's just really a relief to see that Attleboro fits that same pattern. And it's really eye-opening that we have a significant number of people who are able to test and show no positive cases. People have asked, why are we testing? I continue to answer that question. It's the best measure of school safety that we have. The viral numbers in the community are instructive. They help us to understand the context that the schools are operating in, because obviously the schools are part of the community. But in terms of positive cases within the school, symptomatic or asymptomatic, there's no better way than through pool surveillance testing to really, really know whether or not we have a problem or whether it's safe to come to school. It's also the first preventative thing that we've been able to do. So rather than just wait to find out that someone was positive and was in school and there was an exposure, we were able to now grab people at a sooner point in their infection and help to limit the spread of the virus. And of course, it does finally shed light on those asymptomatic cases that undermine people's confidence in all the various data that we've been able to present, because to their point, it's really hard to know what's true when we can't say definitively whether or not cases are related to asymptomatic cases, because we don't know how many there are. So these are all really strong reasons to do testing. And I should inform the committee that in one of the meetings I was in last week, I was instructed that from the experts' perspective on this, public health and safety people, they believe that we're going to have to continue to do testing for the foreseeable future as part of a new reality in keeping schools safe. I've been told that we should expect that there'll be testing in our schools through the close of next school year at a minimum. right? June of 2022. And with the potential of it lasting longer than that. So testing is going to be part of a new reality. And it's an important strategy for how we're going to make schools safe enough that we can improve the educational experiences by bringing more students back. And so that's my pitch to families who have been standing on the sideline up to now. I certainly can respect that some people wanted to see how this was going to play out, how it looked. And in fact, the fact that we had an uptick in the number of positive of people giving yes to consent after Thursday is a strong indication that kids who saw how it went home and reported, oh, it wasn't that bad. I'd be willing to do that. The fact of the matter is that we're going to have to increase our participation significantly if we're going to really be able to say that our testing program is giving us the full picture. Because right now we have 1,622 students who have provided consent. Right, that's 33% of our students, and of the people who provided consent, 86% of them said yes. So only 14% have said no. But that means that a significant number of people have not responded yet. And as this was a pilot, and we're just trying to get this off the ground to learn how to test. As a district, we've never tested for viruses in schools like this before. So this is a learning experience for us, and I wouldn't even argue that we're good at it yet. But as we go through this and have success with this, we do need to make the case to that 2/3 of the district that hasn't responded yet, because we're going to need to get that number up to a much higher level so that we can definitively say we know our schools are safe. So I really ask that families pay close attention. We're going to be publishing reports that share all the data about how our testing program is going, and we hope that through that we'll be able to make the case. I've asked the state for what exactly is the right threshold, like at what level of participation should we say that that's good. I don't have an answer on that. I don't think anybody's really decided exactly what that number is, but usually the answer when people are saying, well, it's something around, it's 90% or more. So we got quite a ways to go.
Mr. Geddes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a couple of follow-ups. You mentioned 33% have opted in. Of the other 2/3, how can they opt in? Can you direct folks where on the website they would need to go? Or?
So under the COVID tab, there's a side tab for pooled surveillance testing that they can click on. We have detailed instructions on how to access the workflow in Aspen, which is how you do it. It's the same. Aspen's our student database. That's where parents have access to report cards and progress reports. And if you're having trouble accessing it, if you reach out to the school office, somebody there will help you through getting logged in.
Thank you. And what percentage of the educators are testing right now?
I don't have that exact number, but it was a pretty significant number.
Okay. And I can report that I have 2 elementary kids that thought the test was very easy, not very invasive, and thought it was great. You mentioned that one of the meetings you were in, they talked about testing sticking around until at least June 2022. Was there an indication that the state may at some point try to make testing mandatory for students to be in the building, or is the expectation that it will still continue to be optional?
I've seen nothing to suggest that the state is going to make it mandatory.
Excellent.
In fact, I would say the opposite. They seem pretty committed to having it be voluntary, but that having high buy-in because people recognize that this is what we need to do.
Excellent. Thank you.
A follow-up on that, when you say that you heard or the, what's being said now is that it's going to be through June 2022, is that coming from DESE? Is it coming from the feds? Is it coming from scientists? Who's making that?
Public health officials who are working with the state and the federal government to create policy around all of this.
So is this something that, is going to be a push nationwide, or is it?
Yes. So when I heard that it was going through June 2022, I'm sure at least a couple of you will be happy to know that I asked, well, how is that going to get paid for? As you know, this is an expensive enterprise. And while, I keep getting questions about the cost, I want to remind everybody right now it's free, right? Up to this point, we were in the pilot offered by the vendor, and now we've just switched into the pilot being offered by the state. And all that work we did to prepare for that first pilot really put us in a good position that we were off and running I don't think a lot of districts who started fresh were able to jump in quite as quickly as we've been able to. So we're not facing any costs until basically April. We have money from the federal government to cover the cost of the program from April through June. So I'm not so worried about that, but the idea of having to add that as a year-long cost next year is pretty daunting. Two things I was told is, one, that the state is talking with the federal government about ways to cover this cost that are creative outside of the current means. So, I don't really have any details about that, but there are ongoing talks about ways to cover this for schools so that it's not being handled through school dollars. Nobody thinks we should be spending educational dollars on testing. So that's not going to happen this year, and the hope is that there'll be a plan for how to avoid that altogether. But the other thing is that the price has come down significantly. What the state is paying for our testing program now is a fraction of what it would have cost in November, and they're saying that the testing that will be going on in the fall should be a fraction of the cost that we're paying, or the state's paying for our program now. And there's even talk that by then there should be basically, home testing available so that we can do the testing in the buildings without sending the tests out to labs, which would, again, make the cost significantly less. So part of how this is going to get paid for, I think, is that the cost is going to come down by a pretty significant factor, but also part of it is that the state's pretty active in trying to think about how to find funds for this outside of Chapter 70.
Steve?
Yeah, Mr. Hill.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Superintendent, sorry, are you able to speculate or characterize why you think some families aren't buying into the testing, or is it not buying into it, not aware? What's your sense of that?
Anytime you're talking about thousands of people, there's quite a range. Some people are contrarian by nature, and that's really just what it's about. Sadly, we've had some families express that they don't really want to have to deal with the consequences of having a positive case, and so they want to game the system and avoid having to deal with that. But I think these are pretty significant minorities. I think the vast majority of people who are on the sidelines currently just really wanted more information, the kind of information that's only going to be possible until the program is up and running and they can see with their own two eyes exactly how this is working, both in terms of what the test looks like, how we're using the data, what happens when people test positive. Those are all things that I think people want to see firsthand how it really plays out. And then when they see, if we do a good job with all that, I think we'll earn their trust and they'll jump in.
Just to that point, do you think you'll do a follow-up kind of email just like that, just talking about the first results and that?
Yeah, so we're going to do pretty consistent email, keeping people informed about how the effort's going. And then when we've got a couple weeks into this and we feel like we've demonstrated enough success that we feel like we can really make a case, then yes, we'll make a actual push to reach out to families and see if we can't convince them to rethink.
Great, thank you so much.
And so the final thing I would just say, I just want to remind everybody that, one, I'll tell you something new. We didn't test today. That was unfortunate because of being remote. We are not testing cohort A on Thursday. I think some people thought because we did Thursday last week, we would do that again this week, but it doesn't really make sense because we don't have school next week. We wouldn't be able to do the reflex testing. So we're only testing tomorrow cohort B. So cohort B will get their results later this week, and then we'll be able to do reflex testing on Friday. And so just to remind everybody so if you're in a positive pool, the pool, all the members of the pool get a rapid antigen test. The negatives are cleared to return to class. The positives, would have to be isolated and, go through all the things that we go through with anyone who tests positive. So the negatives, the children who are test negative will get just sort of a generic email. Your child was in a positive pool, they tested negative, you're all set. Positives will get a call from the nurse, get the direct contact that we've been doing throughout the pandemic. Then after that communication's been made and we've had a chance to certainly contact the families who had the positives, then principals will send an email to the entire school community saying, we had a positive pool in the building. If you didn't hear from us, then if you weren't affected by it, that message that I think people are pretty familiar with now. And then each Friday, we're going to produce that weekly report on how many people we tested, how many positive pools, and all that information that we had hoped to do last week, but when we didn't have testing, that we'll now be able to do it this week.
Steve? Mr. Storrs?
Thank you. Just when it comes to the cost, so if there is a positive pool test, and for all the students and or staff to be tested, that's part of the cost of the pool testing?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what about those students and or staff who did not indicate that they want to be part of the pool testing? Are they part of the antigen testing?
They are not.
They are not. Could they be if their parents signed off on just that test? In other words, if all of a sudden a parent finds out that their student was in a classroom that the pool testing was positive, because now they may be a close contact, could they get the antigen test through this?
Not through the school.
Okay, so
We only do the rapid antigen test as a reflex test of being in a pool to verify that you are not the positive case.
Okay, so you can almost say that that's a benefit of being within the pool testing.
Absolutely.
So those students who might be close contacts, if they're part of the pool, their testing would be covered and would happen automatically.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I can tell you firsthand, I participated in testing last week, as did my wife, as did my two children. And I've been saying all along that it was going to be a gentle swab, a gentle test, and I'm glad to report that I wasn't lying. The test itself was pretty easy, and getting that result and knowing definitively, right, that I was, not positive, knowing that my children were not positive, was a relief. It was a really helpful piece of information. And I would really encourage parents to think about, what they're missing by not participating.
Thank you. Mr. Geddes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for the report, Superintendent Sawyer. To your point, numbers are improving. I saw our per 100,000 number was down about where it was right before Thanksgiving break. Our January within the schools, our positive case numbers for January were lower than our totals for December. The past 2 weeks were equal to the total from the 1 week before that. So things certainly are improving, but I agree we have a long way to go. The two questions I have, one regarding vaccinations. I know educators were initially scheduled to be getting vaccinated school calendar wise, essentially between February break and April break. Is that still, but I've heard there are delays on the state end with their rollout. So is that timeline still a possibility for educators in the district, or has that changed?
We have a conference call with the state later this week. I imagine they're going to be giving us an update. We were told that February would be when our turn would come up. The governor has said that even with his adjusting of the priorities at the state level, that we will be part of the next group once the current group has finished. So there's reason to believe that we'll still start vaccinations in February, but it's seeming like if that's going to happen, it'll be at the end of the month because they're certainly not ready today.
Excellent. And I know right before the break, when we had the special meeting, right before the holiday break, you had talked about a goal of being able to possibly be fully in person following the April break, depending on vaccinations and community numbers. Is that still a plan that you're confident in, or what would need to change?
No confidence. So we're getting a lot of questions about, when are things going to change? Certainly the CDC sent out some messages last week that caught some people's attention. I think if people read the article, not just the headline, you'd see that the message was that you don't need to be vaccinated to be safely in school. But when you really get into the details, that's if you follow the guidance. Well, we do follow the guidance. That's why we're in hybrid. And I think that message was really aimed at school districts that are still in remote, which nationally there are actually quite a few that still are. So yeah, I mean, we have a long way to go, and we don't know whether things will accelerate in terms of getting better because of vaccines, or whether they will actually slow and reverse themselves as a result of the variant. So it's really, really hard to know what will happen. But you know, we're trying to put ourselves in a position that if it's possible, we've done everything we can to be in a place to take action as quickly as possible. And that's what I've been trying to explain to people who have been asking, is that it's really about doing what we can do in this moment so that when the time comes, you know, we're not caught off guard by that and waste time that we could do that. You know, but for people who think that means that we can, you know, get ready for next week, that's just not accurate, right? So, you know, we know that the vaccination, you know, you get the first dose, and then it's 4 weeks till the second dose, and then it's another 2 weeks until you're actually inoculated. So we're, you know, it's 6 weeks from when we distribute the vaccine to a person that they're actually vaccinated. So, you know, based on that timeline, if we start vaccinating at the end of February, beginning of March, you know, we're not, the very first people we do won't be ready until mid-April. And as we've talked about in a couple different settings in the last couple of weeks, I believe at the forums this came up as well, you know, at some point there's diminishing returns on rushing to get people back into school as we near the end of the year. So, you know, how much time is enough time? I mean, we want to make every effort to get kids back if it's possible. But, you know, it's unlikely that we would, you know, take a move like that, say like after Memorial Day weekend, because at that point, you know, the opportunity has passed us. So it's really about trying to put ourselves in a position where if that's feasible, then we're going to do it. But I want to be clear that there are a couple different factors that go into whether or not it's feasible. And I think it's important to go in a little bit of detail about that. The first is around guidance, right? As we've talked about, under, you know, like just like the CDC said, if you follow the guidance, it's safe to be back in school. Well, that's good, but you know, the guidance is very restrictive. There are aspects of the guidance that make full in person impossible, you know, currently, right? And one of those things is that the guidance says that we're supposed to go into hybrid once we get to 10 cases per 100,000, right? Well, I mean, we're at 43, so based on the guidance, we got a long way to go before the CDC says it's safe for us to consider that. So that's step one. The viral conditions in the city have to change significantly under the current guidance. But then there are also all the other aspects of it, right? Transportation. We can only transport a third of the capacity of a bus currently. So until that changes, that gets in the way of us being back fully in person because we can't transport all the kids. Cafeteria is another big problem, right? But in the classrooms themselves, currently the CDC guide says 6, you know, fullest extent, you know, maximum distance possible, nothing less than 6 feet. The state says 3 to 6 feet. You know, states, I think the state currently says 6 feet whenever possible, but at least 3 feet.
Right.
So under that guidance, you know, we can pull off hybrid. I've said multiple times, you know, in the fall that under that guidance, we cannot be fully in person as a district. But, you know, there's a lot of indications that perhaps 6 feet is going to become 3 feet under the new guidance. So, you know, we're going to be paying very close attention to what that new guidance says. And there's every reason to believe that the CDC is going to be releasing new guidance this week. So, you know, part of February break is going to be really digesting all those rules and trying to think them through. And I just want to clarify that we don't actually follow CDC guidance. We follow Massachusetts guidance. And, you know, obviously Massachusetts bases its guidance on the CDC. And I'd go even further to point out that the new head of the CDC was the person that was doing the Massachusetts guidance before she was appointed to the new position. So there's a pretty strong connection between the way Massachusetts has been thinking about this all throughout the pandemic and how the CDC is going to look at it because it's the same person. So there are going to be changes to the guidance, and until that guidance changes, you know, full in-person is not feasible in the Attleboro Public Schools under the rules that we're currently operating on. And when the new rules come in, we'll take a look at what those are, but I can't predict for you what we can and can't do until we get those rules. So that's going to be a pretty important moment, and I'm hoping that at the next school committee meeting, I'll be able to summarize for you what the findings are based on the new guidance. So that's one part of how we answer the question, well, when are we coming all back? So guidance is a piece of it. The second part of it we've already talked about, which is testing, right? We know that, well, no, we don't know. We anticipate that the new guidance is going to talk about the need for testing and the use of testing data in making decisions about what's safe. Right now, the guidelines about things like, how full are the hospital beds, right? I think that the new guidance is going to be tied much more closely to our testing results, and hopefully they'll give us some benchmarks that we know exactly how many people we need to be in testing. The viral conditions themselves, are a big piece of it. And again, the city is a long way to go before what we're told now is safe. And we'll see whether the guidance moves the goalpost again in terms of what they're saying is safe or not. But I just think it's really important, and I don't mean to belabor the point, but under the current guidelines, what we've been operating under all year long, I mean, it very explicitly says that, the precautions that we're using are effective at low levels of transmission, and you're taking greater risks as the viral conditions in the city get worse, right? And we've been, talking about that all throughout, but I mean, that's explicitly in the rules set by the CDC now, and I'm sure that that'll be a piece of this. So a part of this is simply, the community's numbers themselves. And then the final part is the vaccinations, because while, if you follow the rules, you don't need to be vaccinated. I know that was a very popular headline last week. That's true, but obviously the safety of our employees is important to all of us, and them being vaccinated changes the game for us in terms of what we can do. And we anticipate that the new guidance will make that explicitly clear. So, again, maybe by the end of the week, we'll be looking at that new guidance. We'll wait for the state to release its, but we're trying to get ourselves in a position so that in March, we can really get our head around what we can and can't do, and we will want to communicate that clearly to the community, to the committee, and certainly make clear to you what decisions you have to make as a result of what those changes are.
Thank you.
If there are no questions, that concludes my report.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Sawyer. Next on our agenda, we have a memorandum of agreement with Tri-County for the 2021-2022 school year. This is an annual vote that the committee's been taking now for the last, 4 to 6 years, I guess. And the memorandum of agreement was circulated to all of you amongst with your materials. It is essentially the same as it has been in last years, with the sole change being the number of the amount of tuition that Attleboro will be paying for its students that sent to Tri-County, and that number is the number that Attleboro receives from the state for that student. Is that correct, Mr. Furtado?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And just to refresh the committee members' memory, what this agreement does is it allows students from Attleboro to attend Tri-County if their CTE program of choice is not is not available to them at Attleboro High School. So a student who wanted to attend a program that Attleboro High does not offer can apply to Tri-County. If they're accepted, they then go to Tri-County under this agreement. Attleboro pays Tri-County a tuition for 2021 to 2022. That would be $14,943 per student, which is again the amount that Attleboro gets from the state for a student in a CTE program. Anyone have any questions about the agreement in general, the genesis of it, or the specifics of the document we're voting on tonight? If not, then I would entertain a motion to authorize my signing of a memorandum of agreement for the 2021-2022 school year with Tri-County School District as has been presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Geddes,
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes, Mr. Larson,
Yes.
Mr. Storrs,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. Domenici,
Yes.
Ms. Porto,
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer.
Yes.
Motion passes, and so I will sign that agreement. We'll get it off to Tri-County in short order. Next, we have minutes from our January 25th, 2021 meeting. Minutes were circulated with your materials. Do we have a motion to approve?
Second.
It's been seconded. Any discussion or changes? Or questions? All right, seeing none. Ms. Sawyer,
Yes.
Ms. Porto? Ms. Porto?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Domenici?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Storrs?
Yes.
Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Next, we have our consent agenda tonight. As we have in all these hybrid or remote meetings, I will entertain them all as one motion and then take a roll call vote. The items are motion to accept the contractual obligation in the amount of $26 from Planet Aid, Inc. as broken down on the check receipt dated January 21st, 2021. Motion to accept a payment in the amount of $18.25 from Bay State Textiles to Hill Roberts. Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $3,075 from the class of 2018 to be used to purchase special education technology. Motion to accept the donation in the amount of $50 from Target to the Attleboro High School gifts donation line. And finally, a motion to accept the donation in the amount of $166.92 from Marcotte Design to the class of 2023 virtual fundraiser.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? All right, Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Geddes,
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mr. Larson,
Yes.
Mr. Storrs.
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. Domenici,
Yes.
Ms. Porto,
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer.
Yes.
Thank you. Next, we have subcommittee meetings tonight. We have one report, and that's finance and budget. And for that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Withers. Budget and Finance Subcommittee met last Wednesday. Mr. Furtado took us through the monthly numbers. We're continuing to run almost a tale of two cities. Continuing to run about a $500,000 to $600,000 deficit in the lunch and abacus program. We have received an additional grant from the government to help pay for COVID-related teaching and equipment and cleaning and basically anything that's relevant to COVID. So we still have a challenge ahead of ourselves to land the year the way it's supposed to. We'll continue to keep the committee updated through the spring as we get closer. We did have an MSBA update. The high school project is still on schedule and on budget. We had a brief discussion about a cooling tower here in this building at Wamsutta. There's a couple different options that are continuing to be evaluated. So when we get a little closer to that, we'll bring more information to the committee. We did start the preliminary discussion about the FY22 budget, the timing. There'll be a presentation at our next meeting from the administration. There's a conversation about the city's commitment, state funding levels. And again, there'll be more coming forward in the next 2 weeks. We do have one item of housekeeping. There was one invoice that needs to be paid from a prior year. So I would entertain a motion to send to the entertain a motion to send to the municipal council for approval to process a prior year invoice totaling $93.06 to be paid from school department funds.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? You should have received information in the packet that you had for the meeting. All right, seeing none. Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Geddes,
Yes.
Chairman Withers,
Yes.
Mr. Larson, yes. Mr. Storrs?
Yes.
Ms. Porto,
Yes.
Mr. Domenici,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you very much. That's all we have.
Mr. Larson, just one question. You said that a presentation on the fiscal year 2022 budget at our next meeting, is that our next full committee meeting or your next subcommittee meeting?
I believe at the next full school committee meeting, which is the end of February.
Thank you. All right, that concludes our subcommittee meeting reports for tonight. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Storrs?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Domenici?
Yes.
Ms. Porto?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.